Good evening. My name is Lisa Hetfield, and I am still the interim director for the Institute for Women's Leadership, but not for too much longer. I am, on behalf of Rutgers and IWL, so pleased to welcome you to our third annual Anita Ashok Datar Lecture on Women's Global Health. Thank you all so much for coming. We are thrilled that Rayka Zehtabchi is here with us tonight to give us an opportunity to meet her, learn from her, and to screen your film. Rayka, welcome to Rutgers. Thank you for traveling from sunny Los Angeles to not so sunny New Jersey. She asked me in the car, "Oh, is this pretty typical weather here?" I said, "No, it's usually sunny every day." This is a real treat to welcome you, and Rayka has already been meeting with students and sharing, listening to them and learning from each other, so thank you. IWL and our 9-member units are known nationally and internationally as a vital source of information about women's lives and leadership, and we feel the go-to place for women's education and research. Our consortium members work to analyze and increase women's participation in politics and public policy, with a special focus on looking at inequality and violence against women. We examine women's experiences in the workplace, in global women's movements, in the arts, in the sciences, and we conduct research in women's and gender and media studies. Women's global health has its roots in all of these areas. Rutgers is so very proud to be the home of the Anita Ashok Datar Lecture Series. This is truly a collaborative endeavor, and I want to especially thank our co-sponsors, Rutgers Global and Douglas Residential College, and really hats off to our event team who actually are the ones who make this happen. Emily Herron, Rick Lee, and Greg Costales. Thank you so much. The Anita Datar Lecture has many stories. Probably, you could say, beginning in the 1990s, when Anita was a student, an undergraduate student here. At Rutgers, she was inspired by her classes, by her community of friends, and by a study abroad experience. She set out to make a difference in the world, and in the 20 years after she graduated, she had already achieved so much when her life was tragically cut short by a terrorist attack in Mali. This annual program in her name was launched by a committee of friends and family of Anita, some of whom are with us this evening. Each of them, they each have their own Anita stories about the ways she touched their lives. We think of this lecture as a celebration of her life and as a way of inspiring the next generation of advocates and activists for women's global health. It is my pleasure now to introduce Dr. Sanjeev Ashok Datar. Dr. Datar, I have to read this, is a pediatric clinical care specialist and associate professor in pediatrics at the School of Medicine, University of California, San Francisco. He and his family traveled a long way to be with us tonight. He is Anita's brother and a wonderful partner in this endeavor. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Datar.
Good evening, everybody. Dr. Lee, Rutgers Global, Lisa, the IWL. our extraordinary speaker, Rayka Zehtabchi, and many friends, new and old, who come in now for the third year in a row to join us in celebrating not only my sister, but also all the potential here at Rutgers and what this forum is supposed to celebrate. As always, my family is very thrilled to be part of this now for the third time in a row, and we're really grateful to Francine Newsom-Pfeiffer, Doug Meehan, and Lisa Hatfield. She didn't really go into much detail, but they really were the ones who were at the forefront of this, putting this all together almost 4 years ago now, 3 years ago, to make this possible. Really brainstorming through a number of different ideas in the best way to really do something more than just to mourn, but something to really celebrate and then to inspire and be inspired by the students here at Rutgers and around the world, undergrads, graduate students, and the young people who are really taking the reins of hopefully this country and the world to really make a difference. And so they've really done this together. In part, I have to say a very particular thank you to David Garten, who is Rohan's father, who has this uncanny ability to spin through his Rolodex, and even when they're not actually names in the Rolodex, to just somehow find the right connection and put us in touch with phenomenal speakers, and then going through every possible machination to make sure that something comes together and ensure that these kind of events have been really not just phenomenal, but extraordinary and successful in every way. So I think we feel lucky. My parents who are in the front row here, and my family here and as well around the country, we feel very, very lucky to have this support from the Rutgers community. As you know, Anita was a student here, and later on she was a preceptor right across the hall, along with Francine, and she earned her degree in psychology in 1995. She then spent 2 years outside of Vélingara in Senegal, traveling around the countryside, educating women and men on reproductive health, family planning, and HIV prevention. She came back to the States in the late 90s and dedicated the rest of her life to improving health and human rights for the most vulnerable people. She earned a dual master's degree in public health and public administration, and then worked for the next 10 years in health policy and program development in support of reproductive health, maternal child health, and HIV prevention, as well as management of these issues throughout the developing world. She tackled these serious and challenging issues with her own brand of optimism. She was a beautiful person inside and out, and her mind and her radiant smile really gave hope and help to people around her. She had this amazing ability to connect with everyone and make them feel special. Her enthusiasm for life and laughter were contagious. In the fall of 2015, a few weeks before a trip to Mali to help improve the region's HIV/AIDS and reproductive health response, she reflected on what motivated her. And these are her own words that she wrote down in a letter to a colleague. Edited. I find tremendous joy and satisfaction in being an advocate and champion for what is possible, for women, children, adolescent girls, young boys, and men. I have memories of laughter and sisterhood while working with young women without formal education and training them to give reproductive health and family planning talks to adolescents and village elders. Also of finding human connection while discussing gender and sexual diversity in conservative and traditional cultures, and the satisfaction of hearing participants evolve their understanding of diversity and tolerance. I believe that we share this passion and commitment to health and human rights. When Francine, Doug, and Lisa approached us about this lectureship, we were hopeful that it would provide a vital forum to meet and discuss the opportunities and challenges in global public health and how best to keep fighting for the health and human rights of women and children. As evidenced by the last two lecture series on family planning as well as on women's education, we've really, I think, hit a high bar to achieve, and I couldn't be more pleased for this evening's speaker, because this is really a real-world application of a basic human right, basic women's right, basic fundamental health issue that is about, again, not just health, but equality, and focuses on a practical real-world solution that can improve the quality of life of millions around the world. And by this simple act, which is a complicated issue, but by this simple act, raise millions of people up out of poverty in a lot of different ways, simply by allowing them more years of education and therefore more access to the world's economy. I mean, it is a clear application of what Gail Smith talked about 2 years ago at the inaugural lecture. So I don't want to keep talking, but I do have the pleasure of introducing the beginning of the screening of this award-winning documentary film by Rayka Zehtabchi, Period. End of Sentence.
Good evening. My name is Boca. I'm a senior studying cell biology and neuroscience with a minor in women and gender studies. And in my coursework, I've learned that women's health is more comprehensive than just the reproductive system. However, for many women, young women around the world, the fact that they menstruate can shape their future in terms of education, marriage, and profession. Here's where the power of words comes into play. Starting a conversation about these issues is just the beginning of a pathway to social change. Many countries around the world, for example, are reconsidering the tax on menstrual products. Just last week, the New York Times reports that in Germany, menstrual products will no longer be deemed luxury goods that are taxed at the highest possible rate. Instead, they will join the tax bracket alongside items deemed necessary for everyday life. Here in the United States, 33 states have introduced legislation to eliminate the tax on menstrual products, and New Jersey is one of the 12 that has already eliminated the tax. I'm very excited to introduce the Oscar-winning filmmaker Rayka Zehtabchi. Her directorial debut, Madaran, is an Iranian language short film. It won jury awards at top film festivals and qualified for the 89th Academy Awards in 2016. Her passion is bringing awareness and action to little-known social issues. And as we just saw, her Oscar-winning documentary, Period. End of Sentence, follows inspiring women who are working to make their voices heard. Currently, Rayka is working on a feature film based on her family's experiences immigrating from Iran to the United States in the 1990s. In both documentary and narrative, she brings a naturalistic approach to storytelling, striving for honesty and intimacy on screen. Please join me in welcoming the award-winning filmmaker, Rayka Zehtabchi.
Thank you so much. That was very impressive. You memorized my bio. I haven't even done that. I can't tell you how truly honored and grateful I am to be here with you all this evening to talk about Period. End of Sentence. It's been quite a journey. I think now we're about almost a year after the Academy Awards. And as you can see, this little train keeps chugging along. And there's a lot of work that we've continued to do since the release of the film in 2018. So tonight, I would love to speak to you all about really the journey of Period. End of Sentence, because it's an interesting one. It's a little bit of an anomaly, and I think it's incredible to see how much impact this film has made since its release all over the world. So I think what's funny is a lot of times people assume that I came up with the idea or concept for Period. End of Sentence and set out to make the film. What's incredible is that this actually started about 8 years ago with a group of high school students in Los Angeles. These were 15, at the time, 14, 15, 16-year-old girls, and their English teacher, Melissa Burton. They would go to the annual UN's Commission on the Status of Women conference in New York City, where they would go to different talks and learn about the issues that are affecting women globally, and the solutions that have been put in place for some of these issues. And so about 7 years ago, Melissa Burton, an English teacher and also passionate feminist, takes her students to the UN Commission on the Status of Women conference, and it's there that they learn that there's this worldwide issue of women and girls who have no choice but to drop out of school because of a lack of access to sanitary hygiene products. And that this primarily happens in developing countries, but also there's a shame and stigma associated with menstruation all over the world. It's there too that they learn about this incredible man named Mr. Murugananthan, a villager from India, who one day noticed that his wife was menstruating and she was using unhygienic methods to take care of it. And he felt that there should be something better available to women. So he set out to make the world's first pad-making machine. And throughout the process of inventing this machine, he used all sorts of unorthodox methods, causing him to ultimately be shunned from his own village, and his wife to divorce him. So it was definitely without challenge, or with challenge, the process of inventing this machine. So he invents this machine, and Melissa Burton and the students learn about this issue at the UN, and they come back charged and energized, saying, we want to be part of making a change in the world, and we want to use the privilege that we have as private schoolgirls in Los Angeles to make a difference in the world. So they decided, being Angelinos, that the best way to do this is to make a film, to make a documentary. Except no one knew how to make a film at the time. I can't say I really knew how to make a film at the time, because at the time I was in my first year at USC Film School learning how to become a director. So right when I graduated from USC Film School in 2016, I got a call from Garrett Schiff, who is one of the dads of one of the original girls that had gone to the UN. And Garrett calls me and says, hey, I know you've never made a documentary before, but we're looking for a young female director to come on board. This is the issue. Women and girls dropping out of school because of a lack of access to sanitary hygiene products. And at the time, I remember I have a very vivid memory of boarding a plane. I was going to visit my family in England. And I was sort of having this existential crisis. What am I doing with my life? Who am I? What does my future look like? How am I ever going to become a director? No one cares about me. You know, the things that recent college grads worry about. And I was so moved by this because I was completely shocked that this thought had never crossed my mind. I never thought in my life that there would be women in other parts of the world that wouldn't have access to sanitary hygiene products. Because to me, I grew up in Southern California, and access to a pad or a tampon was like having access to toilet paper. It was sort of a given. You go into the grocery store, to the market, to CVS, Walgreens, and there is a whole wall of options, right? You have with wings, without wings, scented, unscented, organic, inorganic, diva cups, thinks underwear, menstrual underwear. There's all these options, and for me, I genuinely felt guilty that I had never thought about these other women. I genuinely felt ashamed. And it stuck with me during my trip to England, and I came back and immediately said yes to the documentary, even though I was terrified out of my mind because I'd never taken a class in documentary filmmaking at school. In fact, my knowledge of documentary films didn't go past the one that I watched, which was Food, Inc. Great film, by the way, but that was the only one. And I felt really excited. I felt very, very excited. I had no idea what I had just agreed to. But how it was initially pitched to me was sort of, we want to make an awareness film. And as I entered the group and more conversations with Garrett, I came to learn that they didn't really know what this was going to be either. In fact, I think we were originally anticipating a YouTube PSA awareness documentary, a few minutes long. It wasn't until my first meeting with these high school girls at an English office in a private high school in Los Angeles when I went and met what would be my producers. A group of girls who were 16, 17, 18 years old now, never produced a film before, didn't know anything about filmmaking, but they were so incredibly passionate and invested in this cause. They felt like this was their calling and parties didn't matter. Their college applications really did matter. That was the only thing the only time they would ever cancel meetings. But spring break, whatever, you name it, they were there in that English office with me and Melissa and Garrett. And it was there really that this idea, the seed of an idea, this desire to change the world somehow or make a difference in some way, really started to snowball. They were incredibly exciting early conversations. And I think the only information we had was the information that was on the internet, which was these reports from the UN stating that, again, I'm going to repeat the same line, women and girls dropping out of school because of a lack of access to sanitary hygiene products. So for us, it felt very dire. And the girls initially wanted this film to be about their group working to make change with the women in India. And why it was India was because they had actually done the legwork and connected with a local organization in Delhi called Action India, who works with women in villages to talk to them about women's health issues and to try to educate them and unite them. So these girls were adamant that, initially, we're going to make a film about them. So we had a few days of filming in Los Angeles where we followed these high school girls. And the idea was that we're going to go to India once and we're going to speak to the women there and we're going to get the story, shoot the film, and come back and edit it, and we're going to be done. So we rolled out a Kickstarter campaign. Anyone familiar with Kickstarter? Yeah. It's a hugely undervalued tool, I think, and the reason for 3 of my films being out into the world now. It's because of Kickstarter. So we did a Kickstarter campaign with the girls, and we raised about $40,000. And this $40,000 was used both towards purchasing a machine that we would ultimately install in a village that Action India helped us find in near Delhi. And then the rest of the money would go towards the production of the film. And what was amazing was the opposition that we received in Los Angeles. The question was, why are we spending this much, $30,000 on a film when we could be spending it to purchase more machines? And our initial gut reaction was always, well, because everyone's going to see a film, and all of a sudden we're not going to have enough money for 2 more machines. We're going to have enough money for hundreds more machines. But that's the dream, right? And no one ever thinks you can achieve the dream. So for us, it was really important to shut that down and to continue chugging along. And so I came on the film as a producer as well with the rest of the girls. And we started gaining contact with the women in India, in the village. And we would do Skype calls back and forth. And we had a producer on the ground in India who helped us coordinate these Skype calls. And we'd ask them questions. I have videos on my computer still of one of the initial Skype calls with the village women that you see in the film, and us showing them a tampon for the first time. And they just all roar into laughter, and it's really great. But those were sort of like the beginnings of these conversations with these women, because when you don't have money and you don't have time, you don't have the luxury of going and spending a ton of time in these places and really, getting to intimately know these women. So we were able to use technology to do that at first. So we laid the groundwork, hired our crew, and went to India. It was me and Sam, my creative partner and boyfriend, who was the DP and the editor of the film. Sam and I went the first time to India, and we went straight into the main village, which was Katagiri, and it was the first time that the machine was being delivered and installed in this village. So at this point, nobody knows what's going on. So we took the opportunity to really survey the women and men and try to understand what is the thinking, what is the mentality toward menstruation in this part of the world. And it was remarkable to see how few women actually knew what would happen to their bodies every single month. So many women were ashamed. They felt that they were dirty or impure. Many women thought that they were ill or there was something wrong with them. Many men thought that it was dirty and impure and that women are gross and that they shouldn't come near them when it's happening. And many young women actually told us that this was the first time a human being had ever had a conversation with them about menstruation. And that they were so relieved to learn that they were actually okay. So that shook me, because I think it goes beyond the statistic of women and girls dropping out of school because of a lack of access to sanitary hygiene products. To me, that speaks volumes. That says that women are actually afraid of their own bodies. And if you're afraid of your own body, I can't imagine what else you would be afraid of in this world. So we continued to survey these women, and we also learned that young women, whenever they would menstruate, after many, many conversations, getting them to finally trust us and open up to us, we learned that women actually use rags. I know that it's different in different parts of India and different parts of the world. Some women don't even have enough access to that much cloth, because honestly, I can't even imagine I would have access to that much cloth. Women also use ashes, leaves, paper, whatever they can find. And one woman I spoke to actually told me that she would go out every month and purchase a brand new sari, suit, traditional Indian garb for women, a brand new one just to use for her period. And we sort of compared the cost of a pack of pads, Stay Free or Whisper pads, because those were the only two options that were available to women in villages or anywhere near villages. And the cost was, let's just say the suit cost a lot more than a pack of pads. The reason why she was purchasing a suit as opposed to a pad is because she didn't know what a pad was. And for me, I felt heartbroken, because it wasn't that there was not enough access. Of course, there isn't enough access for all women. However, the village stores were actually selling pads. They weren't selling many pads. I think if all women knew that there were pads in their village, they would probably find the means and go purchase them. It's that most women just didn't even know what it was. Mothers had never spoken to their daughters about periods. Aunts hadn't spoken to their nieces, I was going to say nephews, nieces about their periods. Girls wouldn't even talk to their friends. And it was all because of the shame and the stigma. And after digging and digging, we came to realize that a lot of mothers themselves were afraid of their own periods. And they were afraid that people would find out about their daughters menstruating, because that would mean that they were now at an age to become a target of sexual abuse or harassment. And so they would try to conceal this information from their village. So the machine was installed about a week after we had these conversations with these women. And as you see in the film, the training happens, training on the machine. And being in there, in that room, it was absolutely electric. The energy was crazy. A lot of these men had no idea what was going on in there. In fact, you hear the one man saying it's a Huggies machine, except he didn't say Huggies because Netflix is Netflix, and they had to take out the word. But these women their lives were about to be changed. And so when I came back to the States after the first trip, I came back and I was the carrier of all the news and information because we were the only ones that had gone. And I said to everyone, listen, this is not a film about LA meets India. This is a film about these women in these villages starting a business making sanitary pads. And why I felt so strongly that this was the story that we needed to tell was because I saw that sparkle in these women's eyes. I saw that this machine was about to change their futures. They were about to become empowered, and all their dreams and their aspirations were about to become real and attainable because of this machine. And I felt empowered by them because when I spoke to them, I didn't see women that were disadvantaged in any way. I saw women that were tough and strong and had to deal with a lot of, excuse my French, BS throughout their day-to-day lives. And they would brave through it. And with humor and with grace. And so I felt very strongly that this film needed to be about those women and nobody else. Because as a Westerner, as someone who grew up with all the access in the world, I think watching a film about women on the other side of the world being so empowered and doing this incredible thing of starting a business when I couldn't even imagine starting a business, I think that gets you motivated to do a lot more than what you're doing now. And that's really what I wanted this film to be, not a Band-Aid, but rather a solution. So we finally decided that it was going to be absolutely essential for us to go back a second time to India, that we really only had half of the story. Because the big question was, what are these women going to do now? How is this going to be a functioning business that's sustainable? What will happen to the pads? Will people actually want to use them? Will the conversation begin in the villages? Because at this point we'd installed the machine, but everything was sort of hush hush at this point. So we waited about 6 months for the machine to really begin to take off. We gave the women an opportunity for them to start producing these pads. And we went back to India, me and Sam, camera in hand. And the experience that we had was absolutely remarkable. I remember the first day we arrived back in the villages, Sneha, the main subject in the film, actually took me and Sam's hand and pulled us into the pad machine room and showed us how to make a pad. She sat Sam down, she sat her father down, a village elder, and taught them how to make a pad, which is what you see at the end of the film. And I thought that was amazing because as cool as Sneha is, she, as much as she wanted to join the Delhi police, she wouldn't talk to us about her period when we first met her. And now she was completely transformed. And we saw tons of women working in the pad machine room, facing all sorts of challenges, lack of electricity, opposition from a drunken village elder, lack of access to enough resources to make the amount of pads that they really wanted to make. But the women kept moving along, and by the time we came back, they had made thousands and thousands of pads. And now the big question was, how are we going to distribute them? Because they weren't businesswomen, and we had no experience with that either. So really what you see in the rest of the film is the kind of organic progression of this business, and the awkward kind of goings on of learning how to sell door to door, even though they never really intended on doing that in the first place. But they discovered that this was really the best way to sort of spread the word is through selling door to door. Since the film's release, we've now installed 3 other pad machines in neighboring villages. We've established the PAD project as an official nonprofit organization. And the PAD project now aims to be a resource for anyone who's looking to donate or join this movement of helping install a pad machine in a community in need anywhere around the globe. And all the people that are involved in the PAD project are the original producers of the film. We're all the board members of the organization. So we still have a lot of work to do. But I think the most incredible part of this entire journey, how much it's transformed all of us, is seeing the cultural impact it's had. After Netflix, the film became available on Netflix. It's now available to hundreds or over 100 countries around the world. After the Academy Awards, it sort of, it sort of entered into our everyday cultural conversations. And I couldn't have asked for anything better, because I think I was speaking to one of the young women here who runs the Period organization on campus. And she said, I'm really struggling. People aren't getting really excited. People don't feel like this is their issue. So, how do I get people invested? And my answer to her was, make it hip. Make it something that is exciting for young people to join in on. It's a cool club. It's something that we all want to be a part of. And I think truly seeing our film subjects starting a business and becoming activists all over India, to me that's really hip, and that's really empowering and exciting, and I want to be a part of that as well. So that's pretty much the journey. And before I finish, I just want to say thank you so much to Anita's family and to the creators of this program. I truly wish I would have had the honor of meeting her. And thank you all to all the students who are in this program and are doing the incredible work of speaking about women's health issues around the world. So thank you.
Hi.
Hi.
So my question is, how do you maintain the line between depicting a really honest story and also maintaining the dignity and the privacy of the women or the subjects in the film?
That is a wonderful question, and as a first-time documentarian, one of the biggest challenges I had to face, especially going into these rural areas and speaking to women about something so, to them, shameful and intimate. I think it's really just listening to your subjects and respecting them, ultimately. We would have many conversations off camera, and once they felt comfortable or agreed to be on camera, we would then roll camera. It wouldn't always turn out the way that we wanted it to, because they would say something off camera and then lose their words when the camera was rolling. But I think, we had about 40 hours of footage, and there was some footage in there that I chose to leave out, even though, I thought it was profound or impactful in some way, because You're absolutely right. There is a fine line, and you have to. These are people's lives ultimately, so you have to respect them. A lot of the women were so brave to come forward and talk about the issues that they dealt with, but I think it really happened in editing the film, because that was really a time when you write the film that you're going to share with the world. So it was then that we sort of would pick and choose what we needed to say.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, oh gosh. I was just wondering about the scene where there's just this whole like mound of women's like discarded cloth. Like, how did you gain their trust enough to like have them show you this place, you know?
So that was just out in the village when you're walking. You just see a mound of cloth. And that was one of the biggest problems that they faced is even with Whisper or Stay Free pads is these are not biodegradable, you know, and with the cloth, they just like had nowhere to dispose it. So a lot of women actually would tell us stories about how late at night when it would get dark, some of them would go out into the fields, because these are rural areas, so they would go out into the farms and they would bury their rags. But at the time when we had arrived the first time in India, the women were actually afraid to do that because one woman was raped just a couple nights before we arrived out in the fields. So it would be a common thing to just kind of dispose of the cloth just out while you're walking along the path. But I will say the pads that are generated by this pad machine that we installed are 99% biodegradable. So you still have to bury them, but they'll disappear eventually.
Thank you.
Okay, so my question is a little bit related to that. And I apologize because I'm a lecturer in global health, so I'm probably going to talk a lot more than I should. But I guess my very basic question is that were there women that were using fabric cloths that were washing and reusing their fabric cloths? Yeah, okay. And so I guess I'm coming from anthropology, so I guess one of my recommendations in terms of building trust and working with communities, if you're going in to like work on sensitive topics with women, would be to like work with anthropologists and people that maybe already have relationships built up with those communities. But kind of in the context of what I've been watching on Netflix, reading, my concern or my question is there any sort of coercive techniques or shaming going on with women that, because women, they do have a particular knowledge and a particular way already of dealing with menstruation, right? And this is a technical, first of all, congratulations. Like the film was great. It was a great story. But my question is like, is the goal 100% pad use in India, right? Or is the goal to give women more choices? And so my question is, you know, is there evaluation going on around kind of the positive and negative effects, and at the same time, are there plans on the table to open up other options for menstrual hygiene to these women?
Thank you so much for your remarks. Those are really great questions. And it's always great to hear from an expert. So you're absolutely right, best to work with anthropologists, of course. We didn't work with anthropologists, but we did work with Action India, who the heads of the organizations and the volunteers in the organization are actually village women. And they've been working in these villages for over 20 years. And before we came, they were actually holding these workshops teaching women that if you're gonna use cloth, you should wash your cloth and you should dry it in the sun because we need to, kill any existing bacteria, and that it's important to be hygienic when using cloth. And I completely agree with you. I don't personally think pads are the solution. I don't think tampons are the solution. I don't think Diva cups are the solution. I think it's whatever works for the community that you're in. Whatever works for the women of that community. There's been kind of a lot of people saying, why are you not pushing for Diva cups? Cups are amazing, but they're incredibly expensive. And then there's also sort of cultural and religious issues surrounding them as well. So I don't necessarily think pads are the solution. I think what needs to start first is conversation and really breaking that taboo and the stigma. And that was the point of this film. Even though sort of the thread is, or the heartbeat, if you will, of the film is this pad machine. It's really about showing these women becoming empowered and really becoming business women more than anything through talking about their periods. So I don't have the solution yet, but it's definitely something that we're working on at the PAD project.
Hi. So to piggyback on a couple questions, one of them being about the pads, right? I saw that there were conversations around like washing cloths and things as such, but were there any conversations around like the time that you have to use a pad? Like you can't keep it longer than like say 8 hours. Were there any conversations about that and how to like properly use a pad?
There were, yes. And so while we were there were actually, and this is the footage that didn't make it into the film, while we were there, in addition to this pad machine, training the women how to make these pads and use these pads really, the Women of Action India were holding these menstrual hygiene meetings, talking about the different options that you have as a woman and the proper way to use a pad and the proper way to dispose of a pad and so on and so forth. So I don't think it's enough of a solution to have a pad machine installed somewhere. I think it requires a big infrastructure, it requires follow-up education. It's really comes down to different organizations or groups in local area, in some of these areas, educating the women there about their bodies.
And another question that I do have, and it's kind of to piggyback of what you were saying before, and in taking a lot of like gender studies courses, this idea of safe spaces, right? So I saw the scene with the when you guys going into the co-ed's like classroom and speaking to women and asking them like, what is a period? And then there was this one girl who seems completely uncomfortable and unbothered. So were there any form of support that was provided to this girl afterwards to discuss like why did she seem so triggered? And were there any warnings beforehand, before filming, to tell these students like this is what will be discussed and did you give students an option to walk out of the space if they did not want to be in that space?
Of course, yes.
Okay.
Another really great question. So we had permission from the school to go in, from the school principal, from the teachers as well, and they were notified that we were going to be filming on this topic. And like I said, I think people were a lot more excited and proactive and wanted to speak up more before the cameras were rolling, and then the cameras were rolling, and the girl that you actually see in that scene was standing up to sort of bail her friend out because her friend was called on by the teacher and didn't want to answer it, so her friend stood up automatically for her. But then, she sort of struggled to answer the question. And actually off camera, it went on for a little bit longer. But we decided to not use the whole thing because, just out of respect for her. But I will say that since the film, that girl has actually been celebrated and awarded at her school by her teachers and her peers.
So first of all, thank you for a really beautiful film. So this film for me, as you said, is about a lot of things on many levels, about agency, right? But I'm wondering, this whole idea of not understanding my body, being afraid of what's happening to me, that once they start to understand that, I'm curious if this led to an even bigger conversation about contraception. And, this idea of dropping out of school because you have your period and then men can harass you and they come around.
Right. It did. And again, Action India has been working in those villages for over 20 years, and they continue to have meetings with the women talking about contraception, talking about menstrual hygiene, and also really giving them kind of the support that they need once they graduate from school so that they're not in a position where they feel like they have no other options other than to get married and have children. So that's definitely the work that Action India has been doing.
Hi, thanks. So I, along with a few other women, have co-founded an organization called Ayati recently, which helps create educational and awareness programs in rural India about this very topic. So thank you so much. I think you putting this film out and with the Oscar win and putting this mainstream has raised so much awareness. I guess I had two questions. One was part of this huge, I think, endeavor to educate, empower, and make these girls aware. Were you at all involved with younger girls that were actually starting to menstruate and really kind of that generational shift, where that generational shift really occurs? Were you involved at all with some of those aged?
Yeah,
young women?
actually, some of the subjects in the film that speak sort of in the opening montage are younger girls who actually haven't menstruated yet, or one of them had just gotten her period, like I think 2 months before we arrived. So yes.
Okay. And the second word is, and a lot of what we want to do is, like you said, empower girls, which I think is so important. And a lot of the stigma and shame really kind of erodes their self-confidence. So giving them that self-confidence to really overcome one issue is one thing, and what it leads to is another. After the film, have you seen a huge kind of outreach of support for this kind of, because I think that's what we struggle with is, one is making people aware, but really trying to get behind it and finding those pockets of areas that really support this kind of activity. So that would be really interesting to hear.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's kind of the whole reason why we started the PAD project, because after the Oscars and Netflix, it was like donations pouring in, and I believe we've gotten at least one letter from every single country in the world. So there have been all sorts of young women, even in the United States, that have said, hey, I don't have access to sanitary, or I have no way of getting sanitary hygiene products. My family just can't afford it, and I use toilet paper. Or, all sorts of different communities reaching out to us and saying, we'd love a pad machine installed here. Or, we have a local organization like Action India that works with women. How can we partner with you? So there's all of that work is going on. And really in the first year of the PAD project kind of opening its doors, we've been working on a lot of different partnerships and collaborations with these places.
Hi, so thank you so much for that film. I've actually done I'm a physician by training, and I've done some work in India around this topic actually in 2018, so I thought that was kind of cool.
Yeah.
Have you guys ever heard of the organization Days for Girls? Because that's okay.
Yes.
Yeah, because I worked with Impact India, and then when I was there in the state of Maharashtra, and
in Nepal too, right?
Yeah,
Yes.
and they're in Kenya and a lot of other countries. So they're for people that don't know. So they're a organization where people stitch the pads, and they're reusable, and they have print on them so that when you hang them on the line to dry, people don't know. They can't see any stains, and they give women a pair of panties in that too, because some people are that poor they don't have underwear, and a bar of soap, and they teach about hygiene and things like that. So I was just thinking about the sustainability question that had come up earlier, and is that something that you guys are also working on with them?
We are not working with Days for Girls, I'll be totally honest with you, but I would love to see a partnership in the near future with them. That would be fantastic. I think right now what we're in the process of doing as an organization is really figuring out what are the best machines? Because Murugan Anthem's machine is actually open source, so there's all sorts of different pad machines now that have been created all over the world. And so we're trying to figure out which ones are kind of the highest quality pad machines. And we're also focusing on the education factor. But once we sort of get the ball rolling on those things, we'll try to think of other options.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Being a young director and working with a team of such young girls in high school, how was that an asset when you traveled and you did this work? But how was that also a challenge for you?
I think it was absolutely an asset because I felt so close in age to the girls, to the women in India as well. I just think it was very, very helpful. We really spoke each other's language, and I think we both both groups were really aligned on wanting to make this a film that would be hip and exciting and something that would be really empowering. Whereas I think some of the older people had different ideas of what the film should be like. So that was kind of an interesting divide.
Hello.
Hi.
So I feel like this film is so much about the connections that you made with everyone, and I was wondering, if it taught you anything about how community can be used for social change and how having community in general changes filmmaking and documentary filmmaking.
Totally, I love that question. Actually, now that I think about it, and this took me a while to realize, but I do think that at some point, the presence of the camera actually, it wasn't just the machine. I think it was also the presence of the camera and the filmmakers being in the village and asking these women about an intimate thing that nobody had ever asked, spoke to them about in their entire lives. I think that empowered them to speak up. Because as a woman, it makes you go, okay, someone else, from a foreign country actually cares about these issues that affect me. So it took me a while to realize that, but I do really think that, that and also the community coming together in Los Angeles to really rally behind this film, and then not only Katagera, but surrounding villages as well, it really made a difference because the pad machine would not be a success if it weren't for the community coming together and for, word of mouth.
Okay, hi. I loved the film, and I loved the story behind the film. I guess my question is, as you've been screening this film and having conversations, what has been the reaction of men to this film? Can you share some of your feedback that you've gotten, maybe, some notable experiences when you've shown this to men?
Men?
Men, yeah.
Men, like in the film? Or
no,
men who
when
watched the film?
how men have been affected by this film, because I'm a firm believer that change starts with women and men.
Thank you, same. I really do. I couldn't agree with you more. It's really the other 50% of the population needs to engage as well and be invested and interested. It's been remarkable because of course, women are especially excited by the film. But men have been, the reception from men has been really incredible. Really, really incredible. And let me just paint the picture for you. So we won the Academy Award, and the Academy is comprised of a lot of older white men. A lot of older white men. And it takes for them to vote for the film in order for the film to win. And this is hundreds and hundreds of people. And so that just goes to show that it was a really universal thing. Even though it's a film about women's issues, I think every man watches the film and goes, I'm thinking about my wife, I'm thinking about my daughter, I'm thinking about my sister. And I think it's really accessible in that way. So it's been a really great experience. And I have to say, some of the men that were part of the project, like my boyfriend, Sam Davis, they're the most transformed. He is a bigger feminist than I am. Thank you so much. Thanks for the thoughtful questions.
Hi, everyone. We're almost at the end of the evening. My name is Anita Kramer. I'm the Assistant Vice Provost for Undergraduate Research and Experiential Education here at Rutgers, New Brunswick. Thank you, everyone, for an amazing film, amazing discussion. I'm really pleased to be part of this. And this film actually had a bit of a personal note for me as someone who was born in a rural village in northern India. I often wonder how my life would have been different if I had grown up on the other side of the world instead of here. Over this summer, I was invited by my colleague and friend, Rick Lee, from Rutgers Global, to take part in a discussion on how to expand the impact of the Anita Ashok Datar Lecture beyond just this event. Rick, Lisa Hetfield, and I met earlier. We talked over several weeks, and we started thinking about a few main points. How can we best capture the energy and excitement that's in this room and really carry it forward throughout the whole year? How can we create additional opportunities for our students around the topic of women's global health? Fortunately, I had just come back from a week-long workshop at the Stanford Design School, where we were focused on the principles of how to teach design thinking, how to really incorporate design thinking into the curriculum, something that I've become very interested in lately. And I was really eager to apply what I had learned at my workshop. And the timing was really great because we started talking about what would we do if we could do a design thinking lecture or workshop around women's global health. And that idea really ignited, and we got excited about it, and so here we are today. So I'm very pleased today to announce the Anita Ashok Datar Design Lab for Women's Global Health. The Design Lab will be a dinner and workshop which will take place on April 7th, 2020, where Rutgers students will learn and practice design thinking, gain new perspectives on women's health, and apply creative problem solving to addressing a real-world challenge. Thank you very much. I hope you have a great rest of the evening.